Reports from committees and departments. We have County Administrator Mike Jones to talk about reservoir design and construction planning funds.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. This day is a long time coming. We've been working on this reservoir project for many years, and I won't go into a lot of the history other than to say that we started in 1999 with a vote of the people to pursue the Richland Creek Reservoir project, and after that we surveyed the land and acquired the land where the reservoir project will be located. Here in front of us is a presentation board, and I think you have copies of the maps in front of you. I'll describe the operation of the reservoir itself before we get into the details about the schedule and the planning funding. The reservoir itself is a pump storage facility, which means it doesn't stand alone. There's not enough annual waterfall in this basin, the Richland Creek Basin. This is the headwaters of the basin, to sustain what Paulding County needs for its long-term water supply. That means there's a dependence on an alternate water source that gets pumped to the impoundment that we will know is the Richland Creek Reservoir, and that pump will be located along the Etowah River about 3 miles north of Richland Creek in Bartow County. If you're familiar with that portion of Bartow County, you'll see that it's just east of the Cartersville Airport. The water will be pumped from the Etowah River through a pipeline. I don't know the diameter of that pipeline yet, but it's projected to be a 48-inch to 54-inch pipeline, rather large pipeline.
Tall enough for me to walk through.
With clearance. That's a very large pipeline. To give you a scale of what that costs, about every foot of it is $500. That's a long walk from the Etowah River. This is a sizable project that's taken some time to get to this point. Mr. Chairman, when you took office in early 2010 or 2009, your primary objective was to pursue the permit for this reservoir. The water system has vigorously pursued that effort. Michael Carter has done an outstanding job. We reorganized the permitting team, and in September we delivered you the draft permit application that went into the Corps of Engineers. Since that time, there's been a joint review by the stakeholders for the permit. Following that, there was a joint public notice issued, and a public meeting was held at Burnt Hickory Park in Commissioner Barnett's district in November of 2011. Following the public hearing, the Corps of Engineers entertained comments. Normally that's a 30-day process. There was a request early on to extend that. The Corps of Engineers granted that request, and an additional 30 days of comment period was added. That comment period ended last month, and the Corps has since compiled those comments and sent them to us. That's where we stand on the permitting and the status of Richland Creek today. Going forward, we're past the permitting process. We've been in it for quite a long time. Now we want to talk about building this project. Well, to build this project, there was a time when we thought the pursuit of federal funds or a mixture of federal funds and state funds would take us a long way, if not all the way, to the completion of this project. Those days are gone. The idea that we will get federal funds to construct this reservoir is all but certainly not going to happen, which means we're going to have to do it ourselves. In order to pursue that, the state has passed some legislation that will allow public-private partnerships where you can use private funds to do public projects. It's never been done in the state of Georgia. In fact, I think there's only one project that's ever been awarded a P3 in the state of Georgia, which was the Hot Lanes project on I-75. Still to date, no project's ever been built using that legislation. And it's new. It's not unknown to other counties or to other states, but it is the state of Georgia. That's the process that we plan to pursue to construct this project. In order to get to a public-private partnership, sometimes you'll hear it called a P3 step, you have to prepare certain documents for prospective investors to review. The more uncertainty you can remove from the project, the better your price will be, as it is with most anything that you buy. But there are things that they want to know. One, they want to know that you have a site for your pump station. They want to know how big your pump station is. They want to know how big that water line is going to be, the raw water line. They want to know that there are easements in place to construct that water line. They want to know that you own the land for that reservoir. They want to know that the yield out of that reservoir is adequate to meet Paulding County's needs. They also want to know that if they invest that money, that there'll be revenue that gets returned so that those bonds that they will levy can be paid down. So there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of unknowns that have to be addressed. That takes us to this stage of the project. What you have in front of you, in addition to an outline of what the reservoir looks like, is a schedule and a cost summary. That cost summary is broken down into several steps, and let me walk you through that. This cost model is based on information obtained from GEFA, the Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority, which is where we expect to get these funds. Michael Carter and I have met, the chairman and I have talked about this extensively, and at this point we're looking at a March application for these funds. There's a maximum drawdown of $3 million. They will entertain our application in March. And let me stop right there and say that I think it's prudent that we're doing this discussion today, that there is not a vote in front of you. This is an awful lot of information to consider, and this is an opportunity for not only the Board of Commissioners to ask questions of your staff, but for the citizens to provide input to us as well. We will look for a vote to the Board of Commissioners either at the end of this month or the first part of March, or once you're comfortable that all the questions that you addressed to us have been answered. So let's move forward through this timeline and this budget. The GEFA loan approval process would occur in March. If you so choose to pass a resolution accepting these funds, it would be done at the end of this month or the first meeting in March. Next, a preliminary design firm RFQ, which we would write internally and advertise, would go out ahead of these funds. So that's why you see no cost associated with those first two items. The first cost you see there is a preliminary 5% design. It's just shy of $1 million, $921,000. That's at best a good estimate. We won't know what that's going to cost until we finish the RFQ selection process, but I feel confident that that is a very high number. It contains 5 components. There's stream bank mitigation RFP that has to go out, and I'll explain what that is momentarily. There's a pipeline design. There's an intake structure and pump station cost. There's a cost associated with the dam, which also includes the geotechnical borings, and a water treatment plant conceptual design. Those costs are about $900,000. Yes, sir.
This 5%, does that you're saying that's about gets you 5% of the way of designing all of these things? Is that what the 5% means? It
is, and this data would be turned over to the person who ultimately completes the design on the project. What it really does is it allows you to put this information into a request for proposal for those P3 dollars about a year from now. If you don't go through the 5% design and provide this information to the prospective bidders, they don't know what they're bidding on. All they know is they have this picture, but they don't know what the terrain looks like. They don't know how big the pipe is. This picture doesn't resolve their questions. So this 5% design ties that down. They know.
Right. But even without going through P3 or whatever, to build this project,
you're going to go through this process.
So you're not double doing anything.
No.
It's just, this is how you determine how much it's going to cost.
Without question. It wouldn't make any difference whether there were federal funds involved or it was a P3 project. You're going to have to go through this process. But these documents, once completed, will show up in the RFP that will ultimately used on a P3 bid. The next chunk of funds will be spent on stream bank mitigation. The $900,000 that you see is not the cost of the mitigation. It's 10% of the cost of mitigation. Had this project's permit been approved prior to 2008, the mitigation cost on this project would have been about $4 million. Today, the mitigation cost is at $9 million. Had the chairman not pushed to have this permit application entered last year, we would be looking at somewhere north of $15 million in mitigation costs. Every time this project is delayed, the mitigation cost goes up. and it goes up substantially. In 1999, when we originally projected the cost of this project, it was somewhere around $25 million. Today, the mitigation costs are approaching $10 million. This is a down payment. This estimated 10% contract value, you see the credits that we need. We need over 295,000 stream bank mitigation credits. Those are about $30 each. If for whatever reason we're unable to secure our 404 permit application, half of that money is returned. Half of that money is hard. You'll never see it again once you put those credits under contract.
But you gotta have the credits
To move forward.
to move forward.
Absolutely.
Because they're not gonna hold them for you.
That's
for that
correct.
money.
That's correct. And I think it's also important to say that the timing on this is good. When we were in the building boom, you needed mitigation credits if you were going to install crossings of streams, sewer lines, building roads, whatever your needs were, you had to acquire these credits. So there was a demand for them. When the demand was on, these credits were upwards $50, $60 a credit, depending on how many you need. Well, the cost is about half that now. There's a good opportunity to do that. And the fact that we're buying 295,000 of them doesn't hurt either. The next step is the surveying and pipeline easement acquisition. Michael Carter's group has done a phenomenal work on the pipeline route. They spent an awful lot of time. I think this is probably a large dollar amount that we have in there, but it lends itself to the uncertainty of the easement costs. There are a lot of parcels involved. There's going to be a lot of negotiation on easements. There are going to be some places where we can adjust the pipeline alignment and some places we simply cannot. And I don't have to explain to you what happens when you can't move the pipeline route and you have to have the easement.
Mike, I would like to remind the citizens, we've got a lot of new citizens that moved to our county recently. And you say, why would you build a reservoir on a creek that wouldn't keep the reservoir full? Because of the pending lawsuit and the water wars with Alabama and Florida, we couldn't build on the Pumpkin Vine Creek.
That's correct. We studied 4 sites. One of them was Pumpkin Vine, but the EPD at that time recommended what they termed as an off-stream reservoir, a pump storage like this one, which meant it's either going to be Raccoon Creek, Marable Creek, or Richland Creek. And Richland Creek was the preferred site. That's exactly right.
Just so the citizens understand where we're coming from and why we're building a pipeline to keep this area or this reservoir full during drought times.
The next stage of the funds will be the final design and construction RFQ/RFP process. The RFQ is a request for qualifications. The intention is to take all of the information that we've gathered above, place it in a very general form request for qualifications. At this point, we simply want to qualify the teams that will be responding to this. This is not like a normal qualification process we've ever had. These are very large teams. We estimate the project value here somewhere around $100 to $120 million. These teams will consist of a legal arm, a financial arm, a general contracting arm, and an engineering design arm. So most of these teams will have these components. Some will have more, some will have less, but they'll basically all have these same components. We want to pre-qualify those. GFA has suggested that we use the RFQ process to shortlist down to about 3 or 4 firms. If you follow what the state DOT did, they shortlisted the 3 firms. The reason they did that is when you send out an RFP, this is a very expensive proposal that these firms are going to be responding to. It may cost them $1 million to respond to our RFP. If you don't shortlist, then the interest in it goes way down, and the quality of the response that you get goes way down, because the likelihood that they get the project goes way down. So if you shortlist on the front end, then they're looking at maybe a 1 in 3 chance or 1 in 4 as opposed to a 1 in 10. It's just a business sense. The RFQ process will take about 3 months from the time we write it, advertise it, and make the selection. While we're doing the RFQ, we'll begin to write the RFP. That's a much bigger document, portions of which will contain what we've done above. All of the preliminary design work will go in, and the geotechnical work explicitly will go into that RFP. An RFP stands for Request for Proposal. The final P3 team which will bring the money to the table and construct the reservoir, design it and construct the reservoir, will occur sometime early next year. That's about a 3-month process. And we'll all know everything there is to know about RFQs and RFPs over the next 12 months if we move forward with this. There's also a legal and a contingency budget that represents about 10% of the total expected costs. If you add all this up, it's about $2.8 million. When you're looking at the expenditure schedule at the bottom of the timeline, I've taken the legal and contingency budget and spread it across the last 4 months. In red at the bottom, there's a monthly interest payment at 3.13%. Let me explain how this GFA process is going to work. If you move forward with this and GFA approves our loan, we can begin to draw this money down in April. As long as you're drawing the money down, you're going to make a monthly interest payment back to GFA, no principal return. And that process will continue as long as you draw the money down. When you complete this work and you've drawn down all the money you need, regardless of what that number is, 2.1, 2.6, whatever the number ends up being, that dollar amount will be converted one of 2 ways. If you stay the GFA route, at the end of this, let's assume we spend the whole $2.8 million, is converted to a 10-year loan, which will function just like a car payment, just like a house payment. It'll be the principal. The interest rate will be 3.13%, and it'll be amortized over 10 years. If you do that, your costs on that loan would be about $27,000 a month for 10 years. That's what the cost of this would be. What we have to do in our budget is put a dollar amount in there, about $325,000. That would be the budget line item. Sounds like a lot of money. Well, it is. Let's take a look at what we've done over the last few years. If you go back to 2005, that's really where we started spending money on design and surveying and wetland studies and permitting. The years range from low expenditures of $12,000 a year to high expenditures of $336,000 a year. I know Commissioner Graham hates this, but it averages out to $136,000 a year. What Commissioner Graham always tells me, if you take an average, if you have something really high one year and really bad the next year, on average, everything was great. All right, I understand that. But over that period of time, we could expect a normal expenditure of about $136,000 a year. This would be about $326,000, substantially higher. That's one route. At the end of this process, you do not have to take the GFA loan and put it back in the general fund. The preference would be to take this money, assuming again that's $2.8 million at the end of this process, and roll it up into the P3 process so that no general funds are expended on that loan. Essentially, the GFA loan gets paid off and this 2.8 rolls up into the larger project. That larger project will be paid down by revenue generated from the treatment and distribution of water. I know that there's skepticism on whether or not we need to continue with this reservoir. I recognize that some, if you review some of the comments from outside of Paulding County, question Paulding County's need to have it at all. If you look in yesterday's Atlanta paper, it's timely, and I got a copy of it. I know most of you read the paper every day. I was sharing this with Commissioner Ragsdale this morning, and he was educating me on the reading of this. It's something that caught his attention. I've highlighted a section in the lower left-hand corner, and it's really that last paragraph. I want to read you this paragraph. It says, right now, a federal judge is weighing whether to dismiss a case that's been filed by the state of Alabama over municipal water rights to Lake Allatoona. This case has many similarities with the Lake Lanier battle, and it will affect almost half of the water to the Cobb Marietta Water Authority, which serves 800,000 people. 142,000 of those 800,000 people is Paulding County. Our water certainty is anything but certain. It's very uncertain. If you take a look at the ability to pull water out of the Chattahoochee River, and the ability to pull water out of Alatoona and treat it and distribute it to those 800,000 people, and you look at what you can control, we run out of water in 2025. If the Hickory Log Creek does come online and we can actually use 100% of the water that comes, it delays it 10 years. If you fire every bullet in the gun, you're out of water in 2035. If you read the first part of that article that was in the paper yesterday, it talks specifically about Forsyth County. 25 years ago, they signed a contract with the city of Cumming. Sounds vaguely familiar to what we did with Cobb Marietta. That 25 years is up in May of this year. They don't have another option. They wish they had your option. My suggestion is that we move forward with this, but I know there's still a lot of questions that we have to answer. Our contract today with Cobb Marietta says that they will supply our water needs through May 31st of 2032. What I just showed you says that you run out in 2035. You can't build a reservoir overnight. It takes time. As we all know, we've been pursuing this one since 1999. I think we're on the cusp of construction, and this is a process that we have to go through. It doesn't matter where the funds come from. It doesn't matter if the federal government gave you a grant for $125 million and said you don't have to pay it back. You're still going to have to go through this exercise. So this vote that you're going to be making is not a vote on $3 million to move this project forward. It's a vote on whether or not you're going to build this project. And that's what's before you in the next 30 days. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, or Michael Carter.
For the viewing public, one of the reasons I chose Mike Jones to be in the job as county administrator, I knew we had to tackle the reservoir building. Mike Jones is a professional engineer, and his studies was in hydraulics. So it is a key point to this administration, I think, to continue what started in '99 to finish a project. I visited with lots of you. I've talked with lots of you, and it seems to be the key point on everybody's mind for our future, of course, is water. So be looking for your input over the next 10 to 15 to 30 days, according to when we take a vote on this. But I think it's very important for Paulding County's future. And I felt it important enough to carry this project forward and get it to the point where it is today, thanks to Michael Carter and Mike Jones and this board of commissioners. So thank you very much. Do y'all have any questions?
And I appreciate what you gave us, the information today, and it's exciting that we're going to allow the public the next few weeks to have their input, so thank you very much.
Certainly.